The rain had been falling for 3 hours straight when the knock came. It was past 11 at night, and Jim Carson was 30 feet up on a ladder, securing a loose shutter on the back of his house in Williamsburg, Iowa. The town had a population of 3,200 souls, and right now, every one of them was battening down for what the Weather Service was calling a severe thunderstorm with potential for flash flooding. Lightning split the sky, turning everything white for half a second. In that flash, Jim saw his backyard branches down gutters overflowing his old oak tree, bending like it might snap. The power had cut out twice already. His 9-year-old son Noah was asleep upstairs with a flashlight beside his bed, the same way Jim had taught him. Always be prepared. His father had taught him that. The knock came again. Urgent. Desperate, pounding over the sound of rain hammering the roof. Jim climbed down, fast boots hitting wet grass. He grabbed the flashlight from the porch rail and made his way through the dark hallway. Water was running under the front door. Someone was standing out there in this mess. He opened the door. A woman stood on his porch, soaked through an expensive coat, Burberry, the kind that cost more than Jim made in a month. She was clutching a small girl against her chest. The child was maybe 7, shivering so hard her whole body shook. Her face was buried in her mother's shoulder. The woman's voice broke when she spoke. "Please, my daughter, she's freezing. I don't know where else to go." Jim looked at the little girl's trembling shoulders, blue lips, hands like ice clutching a stuffed rabbit. He stepped aside without a word. "Come in." He didn't invite them in because he recognized Victoria Blake, though he did. Everyone in Williamsburg knew the CEO whose face was on the welcome sign at Blake Manufacturing. He invited them in because of the fear in that child's eyes, the kind of fear that had nothing to do with storms. The woman stumbled into his hallway, dripping water onto the hardwood floor his parents had refinished in 1987. She looked smaller than she did in the newspaper photos where she stood behind podiums shaking hands with important people. Here in the dim light of his hallway, lit only by his flashlight, she looked exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. "Thank you." Her teeth were chattering. "Thank you so much." Jim brought towels from the bathroom, handed one to the woman without comment. He knelt down in front of the little girl. "Hey there, you like marshmallows in your hot chocolate?" The girl looked at her mother first, seeking permission before answering. That registered with Jim, filed it away in the part of his brain that noticed things about kids. His son Noah never asked permission for anything, just did it and dealt with consequences later. The girl nodded. 3 marshmallows coming up." He went to the kitchen and started heating milk on the gas stove. Electric was out, but gas still worked. He added chocolate powder and a pinch of cinnamon the way his wife Sarah used to make it. He didn't think about why he remembered that. Didn't let himself. Noah appeared at the top of the stairs in Spider-Man pajamas, hair sticking up in all directions. His eyes went wide seeing strangers in the house. "Dad, Noah, this is Miss Blake and her daughter Sophie. They need a warm place for a bit." Noah processed this with the serious expression that always reminded Jim of Sarah. Then he looked at Sophie. "Want to see my baseball card collection?" 10 minutes later, the 2 kids were sitting on the living room floor, sorting through cardboard boxes. Their voices mixed with the sound of rain against windows, laughing about something. Sophie's giggle rising above the storm, like a small, bright thing. Jim watched the woman Victoria Blake standing in his kitchen doorway. She was holding a mug of coffee he'd poured her with both hands, like she needed the warmth more than the caffeine. Her shoulders dropped half an inch hearing her daughter laugh. "I didn't know where to go." Her voice was steadier now. "I know who you are. Carson Electric. You wired the factory's admin building 3 years ago. My father said you were the only honest contractor he'd met in 40 years. He said if I ever needed help from someone who wouldn't ask for anything back..." She trailed off. Jim was washing mud off Sophie's shoes at the sink, finding dry socks from the drawer where he kept extras. Your daughter's cold. That's all I need to know tonight. But Victoria Blake needed to talk, needed to release pressure that had been building inside her for months. The words spilled out while Jim worked, while he dried Sophie's shoes with a towel, while he checked that the front door was locked, while he did the small practical things that kept people safe. She'd left her house 3 hours ago, grabbed Sophie out of bed and drove with no destination, just the desperate need to get away. Her ex-husband Marcus had been calling all day, leaving messages that sounded calm on the surface but carried threats underneath. He was coming early. Wasn't supposed to arrive until next week, but he was already in Iowa. Something in his voice had made her run. Jim's phone buzzed in his pocket while she talked. He glanced at the screen. Unknown number. Text message. He opened it. A photo. Tori and Sophie from earlier that evening, taken from across the street with a telephoto lens. The rain visible as streaks. Sophie's terrified face clear even through the storm. Message below. Found them. Jim's jaw tightened. He deleted the text. Didn't tell Victoria Tori yet. No point adding to her fear when she was already drowning in it. I'm not running from a stalker, Tori's voice pulled him back, or a business enemy. I'm running from Derek, my ex-husband. He's threatening to take Sophie. She looked at Jim then. Really looked at him. Waiting to see if he'd tell her to leave, to take her problems somewhere else, to stop dragging a stranger into her mess. Jim handed her the dry socks. We should secure that broken window. Storm's not done yet. They went outside. Jim grabbed a tarp from the shed and Tori followed, insisting on helping, despite exhaustion. The rain had lessened but still fell steady. Jim hammered while Tori held the tarp. Physical work focused them both. She told him about Derek Manning, Chicago billionaire, venture capital, Manning Family Trust, the kind of old money that had been wealthy so long it forgot what struggle looked like. They'd divorced 2 years ago. The custody battle had been brutal. Lawyers who billed $800 an hour, depositions lasting days, private investigators who dug through her garbage and photographed her leaving work at midnight. Derek's team had tried to paint her as an absentee mother, too focused on career to raise a child properly. They brought in expert witnesses to testify about paternal influence, questioned her mental fitness, suggested her dedication to Blake Manufacturing was actually obsession bordering on pathology. He's never hit me. Tori's voice cut through the rain. Never had to. He just makes you afraid of your own shadow, afraid of your phone ringing, afraid to make any decision because he'll use it against you in court. Jim hammered another nail. You make a lot of decisions. Running a company that size, that's different. Business decisions have clear metrics, but motherhood, she wiped rain from her face. Everything's subjective, and he's made me second-guess every choice for 2 years. They finished securing the tarp and went back inside. Both soaked. Jim brought dry clothes for Tori, his wife's old sweatshirt from the closet where her things still hung because he'd never had the heart to box them up. Outside, a transformer exploded down the street. Flash of green light. The power that had been flickering finally gave up completely. Jim moved through his house by flashlight, checking windows and locks. Methodical, thorough, the way his father had taught him. In the closet where he kept important documents, he stopped, pulled out a photo. Sarah holding newborn Noah in the hospital, the only picture of them together. She'd died 3 weeks later. He looked at it for a long moment. Lost my wife 7 years ago. He didn't realize Tori had followed him until he heard her intake of breath. 3 weeks after Noah was born. Infection they didn't catch in time. So I understand running from things that hurt too much to face. He put the photo back. I'm sorry. Me too. Jim closed the closet. But Noah's the best thing she left me. And I'd face anything to keep him safe. Guess that's what you're doing for Sophie. Car headlights swept across the front window. Slow. Deliberate. Tori flinched like she'd been struck. The car passed, then came back. Parked across the street. Engine running. Headlights pointed directly at Jim's house, high beams cutting through rain like searchlights. Someone was watching. making sure they knew it. Jim killed the interior lights. He and Tori stood at the darkened living room window. 20 minutes passed. The car didn't move. Tori's hands shook around the coffee mug. He has people, investigators who find things out, track credit cards, license plates, cell phone pings. What are you running from? Jim's voice was quiet. Really? Tori looked at him for a long moment, weighing how much to reveal to this stranger who'd opened his door without question. Not a man who hit me. A man who made me afraid of every shadow. A legal system that treats wealth as proof of good parenting. The possibility of losing Sophie to someone who sees her as a possession, not a person, a trophy to be won rather than a child to be loved. She turned back to the window. The car's headlights didn't waver. Derek told me once that custody is about perception, and he can afford to buy any perception he wants. Jim thought about his own son sleeping 10 feet away. Thought about what he'd do if lawyers in expensive suits tried to take Noah, if judges who'd never met him decided Jim wasn't fit to raise his own child. He thought about the quiet life he'd built in the 7 years since Sarah died, the deliberate distance he maintained from anything complicated or dangerous, the walls he'd constructed around his heart to keep grief from drowning him. Then he looked at Sophie's small face visible in the living room, peaceful in sleep, her cheeks still flushed from crying earlier, and he made a decision. At 2:47 in the morning, the surveillance car finally left, taillights disappearing into rain and darkness. Jim offered the couch, fold-out bed, clean towels in the bathroom, food in the fridge, lock on the front door he'd check twice. Tori started crying, not loud sobs, just silent tears running down her face like the rain outside. Jim went upstairs, gave her privacy with her tears, stopped at Noah's room and watched his son sleep, arm thrown protectively over his pillow the way he always did. Jim pulled out his phone, looked at the photo of Sarah again, the one he kept in his wallet because he couldn't bear to leave it in the closet. He whispered to it, I know I promised to keep him safe, to not let anyone else in. But Sarah, there's a little girl downstairs who's scared the way Noah would be if someone tried to take him from me. I can't walk away from that. A single tear ran down Jim's face. He wiped it away quickly, put the photo back in his wallet. When he came back downstairs, Tori was sitting on the couch. The children were asleep on the floor surrounded by baseball cards. Noah's arm protectively over a pillow, Sophie sucking her thumb. You can stay as long as you need. Jim's voice was steady. There's a lock on the front door I'll check twice. Clean towels in the bathroom, food in the fridge, and if anyone tries to take that little girl, he looked at Sophie sleeping, they'll have to go through me first. Tori whispered her next question. Why, you don't even know us. I know enough. Jim looked at the sleeping children. I know what it looks like when a kid feels safe, and I know what it looks like when they don't. Morning broke gray and wet. The storm reduced to steady drizzle that painted the world in shades of silver. Jim was making pancakes when Noah came into the kitchen still wearing his pajamas. The boy stopped in the doorway, suddenly remembering there were guests in the house. He looked at his father with a question in his eyes. Sophie and her mom needed a place to stay for a little while. They're friends who need help. Noah nodded seriously, accepting this information the way children accept things adults would find complicated. Can Sophie have breakfast with us? When Tori came downstairs, her face was still puffy from sleep and tears. She found both children at the table arguing passionately about whether chocolate chips or blueberries made better pancakes. Chocolate chips are scientifically superior for Saturday mornings. Noah's voice carried absolute conviction. Blueberries have vitamin C. My teacher said, Sophie pronounced it antioxidants. They've known each other 12 hours and already sound like siblings. Jim flipped pancakes at the stove. Tori stood in the doorway watching her daughter laugh, the first genuine smile Sophie had shown in weeks. Tori's hand flew to her mouth, tears in her eyes again, but different this time. She hasn't smiled like that in, I can't remember. Then I guess we're having both. Chocolate chip and blueberry. Both kids cheered. The calm lasted exactly 2 hours. Jim left for the hardware store around 10. Security camera supplies. He gave Tori strict instructions: doors locked, don't answer unless you know who it is. Something in his gut said they needed documentation. Evidence. Whatever was coming would require proof. Martha Patterson appeared on her own porch 5 minutes after Jim left. Watering plants. In the drizzle. An obvious excuse to get a look at the situation. Morning. Victoria didn't know you knew Jim. Tori came to the screen door. Didn't open it. Martha asked pointed questions wrapped in neighborly concern. How long was Tori planning to be in the neighborhood? Everything all right at that big house. Jim had been alone since poor Sarah passed. Good to see him helping people. Tori answered politely, gave nothing away. Martha promised to bring tuna casserole tomorrow. Retreated to her house already texting someone. The information network that ran through Williamsburg moved faster than fiber optic cable. After Martha left, Tori's phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. Man in gray suit asking questions this morning. Showed photo of woman plus kid. Told him nothing. Thought you should know. Danny at Quick Stop. Tori stared at the phone. Her hands started shaking again. The doorbell rang. She froze. Looked through the window. FedEx truck in the driveway. Package on the porch. No signature required. Tori debated. Then moved fast. Opened door. Grabbed package. Locked door again. Inside, she opened it with trembling fingers. Addressed to Jim. New electrical license renewal application form. Note, inside typed print. Thought you might need this soon. A friend. The blood drained from Tori's face. They weren't just watching, they were threatening Jim's business. His livelihood. Everything he'd built. When Jim returned an hour later, he found Tori teaching Noah and Sophie how to check tire pressure on his truck. She'd learned it from YouTube while he was gone, trying to be useful, trying not to be helpless. Jim joined them, took over the lesson, showed them how to use the pressure gauge, read PSI numbers, add air when needed. Sophie asked the question directly. Mr. Carson, why are you helping us? You don't even know us. Jim knelt down to her eye level, the way he had last night with the hot chocolate. When I was your age, my dad taught me that good men help people who need it. No questions asked. He said you never know when you might need help yourself. Was your dad nice? Best man I ever knew. Taught me everything important. How to fix things. How to keep promises. How to tell right from wrong. Sophie's voice got smaller. I wish I had a dad like that. Jim's heart broke visibly. He looked away for a second, composing himself. Sophie saw a dandelion growing by the fence. She picked it carefully. Can you help me make a wish? Jim held the stem steady. Sophie squeezed her eyes shut, concentrating with her whole small body. She blew. Seeds scattered across the yard like tiny parachutes catching the breeze. I wished for things to stop being scary. Jim's eyes were wet with tears he didn't bother hiding. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. Noah watched his father from across the yard. Dad, you okay? Yeah, buddy. Jim wiped his eyes quickly. Just allergies. Noah didn't believe him, but accepted it with a small nod. Jim's phone buzzed in his pocket. Text message. Photo of his truck's license plate from that morning at the hardware store. Clear image. Professional quality. Message below. We know where you live. We know where you go. Tell Victoria to answer her phone. Jim's face went hard. He looked up. Gray sedan parked at the end of the street. Camera lens visible in the window. Watching them right now. Then from inside the house, Tori's phone started ringing. Through the window, Jim could see it on the kitchen counter. Caller ID visible even from the yard. Derek. It rang, and rang, and rang. 6 times before stopping, immediately started ringing again. Tori rushed inside. Jim followed with the kids. Sophie was clutching Noah's hand. They all stood in the kitchen while the phone rang a 3rd time. Tori answered on the 3rd ring. Put it on speaker because her hands were shaking too much to hold it steady. Derek's voice filled the kitchen. Smooth, charming, dangerous. Victoria, I've been trying to reach you. I know. Small towns talk, Victoria. Especially when the CEO shows up at a random electrician's house in the middle of the night. Tori's breath hitched. He already knew. Of course he knew. What do you want, Derek? I'm trying to be patient, but you're making this very difficult. Sophie deserves stability, structure, not running around in storms with strangers. She deserves a mother who protects her. From what? From her own father. Derek's voice carried practiced concern. Victoria, listen to yourself. You sound paranoid. Don't gaslight me. Not anymore. The tone shifted, dropped a register into something colder. I'll see you in court Monday. And Victoria, bring your new friend. I'd love to meet the man you're exposing our daughter to. He hung up. Sophie appeared in the doorway. Was that Daddy? Tori had to compose herself instantly, force her face into something that wouldn't terrify her daughter more. Yes, baby. Just Daddy checking in. Sophie's voice was barely a whisper. I don't want to talk to him. You don't have to. Tori gathered Sophie into a hug. The little girl's whole body was shaking. Jim stood by the window. The gray sedan was still there, still watching, and something in Jim's chest that had been closed for 7 years cracked open just wide enough to let fury in. He'd made a promise last night. They'll have to go through me first. He'd meant it. The people watching his house were about to find out exactly what that meant. Jim stood at the window long after Derek hung up. The sedan didn't move. Engine running. Exhaust visible in the cold morning air. The people inside wanted him to know they were there. Wanted him afraid. He wasn't afraid. He was angry. That anger felt good. Clean. The first real emotion he'd let himself feel since Sarah died that wasn't grief or guilt or the hollow numbness that filled the space between. Jim pulled out his phone, made the first call. Frank, it's Jim. I need a favor. Actually, 3. Frank Morrison had been deputy sheriff for 15 years and Jim's poker buddy for 10. His voice came through rough with sleep. Jesus, Jim, it's not even noon on a Saturday. Can you run a plate for me off the books? Silence on the line. Then Frank's tone changed, sharper, alert. Jim, you know what you're getting into. This guy's got Chicago money. He can make your life hell. I know what I'm doing. Since when you've been hiding in that house for 7 years? Jim watched the sedan through the window. Watched Sophie and Noah sitting on the living room floor, building something with blocks. Watched Tori standing in his kitchen, looking lost. Since about 12 hours ago, when I stopped hiding. Frank grunted approval. About damn time. Text me the plate number. Second call went to his cousin Elena, paralegal at the county courthouse. Sharp as a tack. Knew every judge by first name and which ones could be trusted. What do you know about Judge Eleanor Sampson? Elena didn't ask why, just answered. Family court, 25 years on the bench, hates manipulation. Why? I need character witnesses. People who'll testify Victoria Blake is a good mother. Can you make some calls? The Victoria Blake Manufacturing, Victoria Blake. Yeah. What did you get yourself into, Jimmy? Helping someone who needs it. Elena was quiet for 3 seconds. I'll make the calls. Third call went to 3 neighbors in rapid succession. Davis family across the street. Martha Patterson next door. Frank's wife Linda 2 houses down. Same request to all of them. If you see cars you don't recognize, take photos. Write down what you've seen about Tori and Sophie, how she parents, how the girl acts around her mother. Each agreed immediately. No hesitation. Small towns had their problems, but this wasn't one of them. When someone needed help, you helped. When an outsider threatened one of your own, you circled the wagons. The sedan pulled away around noon, disappeared around the corner. Jim knew it would be back. He drove to the electronics store in the next town, 40 minutes away. Avoided local gossip that way. Bought 4 security cameras, installation equipment, external hard drive for footage storage. $600 total. Money he'd been saving for a new water heater. The cashier rang him up without comment. Driving home, Jim saw the gray sedan 3 cars back, following, making no effort to hide. He pulled over at a gas station. The sedan drove past slowly. Tinted windows. Couldn't see the driver, just the lens of another camera pointed at his truck. Jim sat there for a full minute, processing what was happening, what he'd committed to. Then his phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. Derek Manning's voice came through smooth as expensive whiskey. Mr. Carson, I think we should talk, man to man. Jim said nothing. Let Derek fill the silence. I want to thank you for helping Victoria in her time of confusion. That's admirable. Really. But this is a private family matter. Legal complexities you're not equipped to navigate. And frankly, your involvement could be problematic. For everyone. Still, Jim stayed quiet. Derek continued like he was addressing a boardroom, using phrases that sounded rehearsed. Best interests of the child, father's rights, legal obligations, the importance of children having relationships with both parents. Then the tone shifted, dropped into something colder. I've looked into your business, Mr. Carson. Carson Electric. Nice small operation. License comes up for renewal next month, doesn't it? Jim's hand tightened on the phone. Contracting businesses depend on reputation, word of mouth, trust. People need to trust you enough to let you into their homes, access their walls, touch their wiring. Reputation's a fragile thing. Derek never made a direct threat. Didn't need to. The implication hung there like smoke. Jim let him finish, then asked one question. Mr. Manning, do you know how many children are in my house right now? Silence. What? 4. 2 of them playing video games in the next room. 2 of them are the reason you called. Those kids can hear everything through these walls. Whatever you say next, whatever threats you make or imply, those children will remember it. They'll carry it into adulthood. This memory of how their fathers behaved when things got difficult. More silence. Jim could hear Derek breathing, recalculating. I'm just an electrician from Iowa. Nobody important. Nobody with lawyers or investigators or money to burn on vengeance. But I know something about fathers. My father was an electrician too. Taught me the trade. But he taught me something more important. He said a man's integrity is the only thing nobody can take from you unless you give it away. You're asking me to give mine away. And I won't. Not for threats, not for money, not for anything. Derek's voice went cold as January. Your father sounds like a simple man. He was. Simple, honest, and everyone in this town came to his funeral. How many people do you think will come to yours? Jim could feel Derek's rage through the phone, could picture the man's face going red, hands clenching. I know what a real father does. Real fathers don't use their kids as weapons. They don't make their daughters afraid. They show up with patience and presence and love that expects nothing in return. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Neither do you. Jim hung up. His hands were steady when he started the truck. steadier than they'd been in years. He pulled onto his street 20 minutes later and saw the gray sedan parked directly in front of his house. Two men in suits standing on his front path, walking toward his door, carrying folders. Jim parked fast, jumped out. The men were already at the screen door. Tori was visible inside, Sophie and Noah behind her, Sophie clutching Noah's hand, both kids scared. "Ma'am, you need to sign acknowledging receipt." Jim arrived at a run. "She doesn't need to do anything. You're on private property, you've delivered your papers. Time to leave." The investigators turned. Professional. Blank faces. Men who did this for a living and felt nothing about it. "Mr. Carson, we're just doing our job." "Then your job's done. She's received the papers. You have 30 seconds to be off my property before I call Deputy Morrison." One investigator ignored him, kept talking to Tori through the screen. "Ms. Blake, for your daughter's sake, you should cooperate." Jim stepped forward, still calm, but something in his body language made both men reconsider. 20 seconds. They exchanged a look, decided not to push, walked back to their sedan. "We'll see you Monday in court, Ms. Blake." Jim waited until their car disappeared. Then he went inside. Tori was standing in the hallway holding the papers. Emergency custody motion. Derek Manning versus Victoria Blake. Emergency petition for full custody. Her face had gone white. The hearing was scheduled for Monday afternoon. 4 days away. The claims were right there in black and white. Mother has kidnapped child. Fled jurisdiction without notice. Demonstrates unstable mental state. Exposed child to unknown male in unsafe conditions. Jim read over her shoulder, felt his jaw tighten with each line. Tori walked to the kitchen, put the papers on the table, started pacing while she called her lawyer. Jim went to the stove, started making spaghetti for the kids, keeping them occupied, letting the adults handle adult problems. Gerald Palmer's voice came through the phone, 60 years old, gravelly from too many cigarettes and too many courtrooms. He'd been practicing family law in Iowa for 3 decades. "Victoria, I won't lie to you. He's playing hardball. Emergency motions like this are rare because they're hard to win. But they create narratives. And judges sometimes assume the parent who can afford 3 lawyers and a team of investigators must be the more stable parent. That's insane. That's the system. We need to flip the narrative. Show Derek as the unstable one, the harasser, the manipulator. But I need evidence, documentation, witnesses." Tori looked at the papers again. "They're saying I kidnapped her by coming here, that Jim is an unknown male with unsupervised access. They're making it sound like you're unfit, I know. That's the game. We're going to beat them at it. But I need you to trust me and follow my instructions exactly." Noah and Sophie were setting the table. Sophie asked Noah if his mom was okay. "My dad will fix it. He fixes everything." Tori's email pinged while Gerald was still talking. She glanced at it. Subject line deposition schedule. She opened it, read the first line, and the blood drained from her face. "Will need to depose the following witnesses: Victoria Blake, James Carson, and Noah Carson, age 9, regarding household safety conditions and male supervision of minor children." They wanted to question Noah, put a 9-year-old boy under oath and ask him about his father's house, about the strangers who'd shown up in the middle of the night. Jim saw her expression, crossed to read over her shoulder. His face darkened with something that went beyond anger into protective rage. Tori ended the call with Gerald, sat down at the kitchen table, put her head in her hands. "I'm going to lose her. He's going to take my daughter and there's nothing I can do." Jim sat beside her, didn't touch her, just sat there in quiet presence for 10 full seconds, then spoke. "Not on my watch. We're going to fight this, and we're going to win." Tori looked at him, eyes red, voice breaking. "How you heard Gerald? The system..." The system isn't the only thing that matters. Truth matters. And the truth is you're a good mother and Derek's a bully. We just need to make sure the judge sees it. Jim spent the next 2 hours on the phone, calling in every favor he'd built up in 20 years of honest work, every relationship, every connection in a town where everyone knew everyone and debts were measured in decades. He called the Davis family, asked them to photograph any unfamiliar vehicles, called Martha Patterson, asked her to write down everything she'd seen about Tori and Sophie, how Tori parented, how Sophie acted around her mother, called Linda Morrison, asked her to film anything that happened Monday if Derek showed up. Each person agreed immediately. No questions. Just yes. Small-town solidarity that money couldn't buy. Then Jim drove to the electronics store and came back with the cameras, spent the rest of the afternoon installing them on a ladder, one facing the street, one covering the backyard, two pointed at the doors. Tori watched from the porch steps, coffee going cold in her hands. Sophie and Noah visible through the window, playing Mario Kart. Childhood innocence, somehow surviving adult chaos. Tori climbed the ladder partway, handed Jim tools, physical proximity, working together like they'd done it before. You're putting your business at risk, your reputation. Derek's already threatened your license, and now they want to question Noah. Jim kept drilling, focused on the work. My business will survive. Built it from nothing. Once. Can do it again if needed. My reputation's built on 20 years of showing up and doing what's right. And Noah, he looked through the window at his son, pushing Sophie on the tire swing in the backyard now, both kids laughing. He's learning what a man does when someone needs help. That's worth more than any contract. But why us? You don't owe us anything. Jim climbed down, faced her. My dad taught me something. He said you never know when you might be the one needing help, so when you can help, you do it. No calculations, no keeping score. He paused, looked toward Sophie's laughter. Besides, that little girl asked me about my father today, made a wish that things would stop being scary. I can't walk away from that. That night at 2 a.m, Jim woke to screaming. He threw on a t-shirt and ran downstairs. Sophie was on the couch bed having a nightmare. Tori was frozen, exhausted, overwhelmed, emotionally spent. Jim went to Sophie, sat on the floor beside the couch, didn't crowd her. Daddy was taking me away and nobody could stop him. Sophie was sobbing, hiccuping breaths, face wet with tears. Jim spoke quietly, calmly. Sophie, look at me. Really look. She did. You see these hands? He held them out, calloused, work-worn, honest hands that had built things for 20 years. These hands have rewired over 500 houses, never failed an inspection, never broke a promise to a customer, and I promise you, nobody's taking you anywhere you don't want to go. Promise. Promise. You know what I do when I have bad dreams? I count backwards from 100. Gets boring enough that you fall asleep halfway through. Want to try? They counted together, 100, 99, 98. Sophie's eyes got heavy around 85, closed completely at 73. Thumb in her mouth, small body finally relaxing. Jim stayed on the floor beside the couch until dawn, making sure she felt safe. Tori watched from the kitchen doorway, tears streaming silently down her face, seeing this stranger protect her daughter with more care than Sophie's own father ever had. Morning came. The black SUV returned, parked across the street at 6:30, engine running, windows tinted so dark nothing inside was visible. 30 minutes passed. It didn't move. Jim and Tori watched from the darkened living room. They sent the kids upstairs to Noah's room. Game time. Pick any game you want. We'll bring breakfast up. Jim had a baseball bat by the door, Noah's little league bat with his name sharpied on the handle. Not that Jim planned to use it, but having it there felt right. The SUV finally pulled away at 7:43. Jim documented the exact time, building his case 1 minute at a time. Both of them knew it would be back. That night after the kids were asleep, Tori came outside where Jim was sitting on the porch. She had a basket of laundry, kids' clothes that needed folding. They worked together in silence at first, Tori folding Sophie's shirts, Jim folding Noah's jeans, hands touching when they passed clothes. Domestic intimacy that felt natural, unconscious partnering. "I don't know how to repay you for this. You don't owe me anything." Tori shook her head. "That's not what I mean. I've spent my entire adult life surrounded by people who want something from me. The board wants growth metrics. Investors want quarterly returns. Derek wants control. Even Sophie's teachers are nice to me because they want new computers for the classroom." She folded one of Sophie's small shirts, pink with a unicorn on it. "Everyone has an agenda. Everyone's keeping score. I learned to read agendas in every conversation. Calculate the cost of every relationship." She looked at Jim then. "And then I knocked on a stranger's door in a storm. And that stranger asked for nothing, expected nothing, just made hot chocolate with cinnamon, taught Sophie to check tire pressure, sat on the floor all night because she had a nightmare." Jim was folding Noah's jeans, focused on the work. "That's just being decent." "No, that's being good. There's a difference." They folded in silence for another minute. Then Tori spoke again. "I didn't choose your house randomly that night." Jim looked up. "My father mentioned you years ago. Said you were the only honest man in town. Said if I ever needed help from someone who wouldn't use it against me later, Jim Carson was that person. I remembered, filed it away. When I ran that night, I drove straight here. It wasn't chance, it was choice." Jim processed this. "Your father knew me. He said you rewired the factory admin building and refused payment when you found out we were having cash flow problems that quarter. Said you told him to pay you when things were better. That was 2009. Jim remembered. Middle of the recession. Blake Manufacturing was struggling. Jim had done the work anyway because people needed jobs and the factory closing would devastate Williamsburg. Things got better. I paid you, double, through an anonymous vendor account. You never knew." Jim laughed, despite everything, despite surveillance cars and custody battles and threats to his business. He laughed. A car pulled up while they were talking. Unfamiliar sedan. Woman got out. 40 years old, professional, clipboard, state ID badge visible on her belt. "Mr. Carson, I'm Rebecca Hughes from the Iowa State Licensing Board. We need to talk about a complaint filed against your business." Jim's face hardened. Tori looked at him, then at the woman, understanding dawning. "This is because of me." The licensing board investigator was professional but thorough. Anonymous complaint alleging substandard work, safety violations, all from concerned citizens who wouldn't provide names. Jim gave her documentation, every inspection he'd passed, every satisfied client, 20-year clean record. Rebecca Hughes admitted off the record that the complaint smelled like harassment, but she still had to investigate. Would need to review his work sites, interview clients. Process could take weeks, might suspend his license during investigation. After she left, Jim stood on his porch watching her drive away. Tori came up beside him. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I should leave. You're not leaving. Jim, they're destroying everything you've built. They're trying. Different thing." But the weight of it sat heavy on both of them. Meanwhile, Martha's network kicked into high gear. Gas station attendant reporting every rental car with Illinois plates. Davis family photographing unfamiliar vehicles. Frank running license plates off the books. SUV registered to a private investigation firm in Chicago. Elena researching Judge Eleanor Sampson. 25 years on the bench. Family court. reputation for despising manipulation, and wealthy litigants who abused the system. Gerald arrived Saturday morning with his legal strategy. Counter motion claiming Derek's emergency petition was based on false premises. Security footage as evidence of harassment. Character witnesses needed. "We're going to paint a picture," Gerald said, spreading papers across Jim's kitchen table. Loving mother exercising her legal rights versus wealthy father using intimidation tactics. But I need proof of harassment. Jim tapped his laptop. Security camera feeds showing 72 hours of footage. Every car that had watched the house, every investigator who'd showed up, every threat. "You documented everything. I'm an electrician. We document everything." Gerald almost smiled. Then he pulled Jim aside privately, voice low so Tori wouldn't hear. "Jim Derek's team found something. Your insurance lapsed for 3 days last year during renewal. Administrative error that was corrected immediately. But they're going to use it. They'll argue you're reckless, that you operated without coverage. If they go after you in court, Tori's judgment could be questioned for staying with someone under investigation." Jim felt the words hit like fists. Everything he'd done to help might actually hurt her case, make things worse instead of better. He stood at the window processing Gerald's warning, considering whether he should tell Tori to leave, whether protecting her meant stepping away. Then a silver Mercedes S-Class pulled up to his house. Derek Manning himself got out. Sunday morning, tailored suit even on a weekend, 2 men behind him in suits and earpieces, bodyguards or lawyers or both. This was the first time Jim was seeing the villain face to face. Derek was tall, 6'2", silver hair perfectly styled, face carefully neutral with practiced control from decades of boardrooms. He walked up the path slowly, deliberately, like he owned the property. The 2 men stayed by the car, professional, watching. Tori stepped onto the porch before Derek reached the steps. Something in her posture had changed overnight. No longer hunched. Shoulders back. Chin up. Forged in the fire of Jim's example. "You're not welcome here, Derek." "Victoria, this is childish. I just want to see Sophie. I'm her father." "And I'm her mother. And she doesn't want to see you. She's 7 years old. She doesn't know what she wants." Derek looked past Tori. Sophie appeared in the doorway holding Noah's hand. Both kids frightened, Sophie pressing close to Noah. "Sophie, sweetheart, Daddy's here. Come give me a hug." Sophie didn't move, just pressed closer to Noah. Derek's mask slipped. Tone went harder. "Sophie, now!" Tori stepped sideways, blocking his view. "She doesn't want to, Derek. She's my daughter. She's our daughter. And she's afraid of you." Derek took a step toward the porch, aggressive body language, testing boundaries. Jim appeared from the side of house. He'd been checking the back camera, heard the voices. Now he positioned himself between Derek and the porch steps. Didn't touch Derek, just stood there, calm, grounded, immovable. "This is private property. Police have been called. Deputy Morrison is 6 minutes out." Jim pointed to the security cameras at each corner of the house, red lights blinking, then pointed to the neighbors on their porches. Martha with her arms crossed and phone in hand. Davis family with their teenage son filming on his phone. Linda across the street openly recording on camera. Derek looked around, seeing an audience he hadn't anticipated. Small-town solidarity he couldn't buy or intimidate. His jaw tightened, hands clenched at his sides. One bodyguard suggested leaving, returning with proper legal authority. Derek ignored him, focused on Jim. "Everything happening right now is being recorded. Every word, every gesture. Your lawyers might want to review the footage before Monday's hearing." Derek turned to Tori, ignoring Jim completely. "This isn't over, Victoria. You have no idea what I'm capable of," Jim interrupted, still calm. "Sir, your daughter is 10 feet away listening to you threaten her mother. Is that the kind of father you want her to remember?" Derek turned to Jim, the mask dropping completely now. Pure fury underneath. "You think you're some kind of hero? You're a nobody. A small-town tradesman who'll be bankrupt within a year. I'll make sure. Are you threatening me in front of witnesses?" "Mr. Manning," Derek caught himself, composed his face. But the damage was done. Cameras had caught everything. "I don't make threats. I make promises." He straightened his tie, unconscious gesture of defeat. Walked toward his Mercedes. Before getting in, he turned back one final time. "I have resources you can't imagine, Victoria. Connections that reach places you don't know exist. Your little electrician friend, his business, his reputation all gone. And Sophie will be living with me in Chicago by next month. Count on it." Derek drove away, gravel spraying. The moment his car turned the corner, Tori's knees buckled. Jim caught her, arms steady around her shoulders. She was shaking. Adrenaline finally releasing after holding herself together for days. He helped her sit on the porch steps, sat beside her, didn't say anything, just present. Monday morning arrived cold and gray. Jim and Tori drove to the county courthouse in Jim's truck, old building, limestone steps worn by 100 years of people seeking justice. Elena was waiting with Noah and Sophie. The kids had been with her all morning, kept away from courthouse stress. Gerald arrived with his briefcase, confident but realistic. Went over strategy with Tori one last time. Derek arrived separately. 3 lawyers, immaculate suits, commanding presence, photographers from the Williamsburg Gazette. News had spread through town like wildfire. Derek saw Sophie on the courthouse steps, started toward her. Jim stepped in his path. "Leave her alone," Derek's lead lawyer spoke up. "Mr. Carson, you're not family. You have no standing. I'm a witness, and I'm asking you to leave the child alone until the judge makes her ruling." Standoff for 3 seconds. Then Derek backed off. Didn't want a scene on courthouse steps with cameras present. While the adults faced off, Noah and Sophie sat on the steps with Elena watching them. Sophie's voice was quiet. "Noah, do you think your dad likes my mom?" Noah considered this seriously, analyzing evidence like the detective he pretended to be. "He smiles when she's around, like really smiles, not the fake kind. He stopped looking sad all the time. My mom laughs now. She didn't laugh with Daddy. Ever. They should probably get married then. That's what people do when they make each other happy." "Should we tell them?" "Nah, grown-ups are slow about this stuff. They'll figure it out." Elena overheard, hid a smile behind her hand. Jim and Tori walked into the courthouse together. Nervous, the kids waved at them from the steps. Inside the courtroom, Judge Eleanor Sampson presided. 60 years old, sharp eyes, silver hair in a bun, no patience for nonsense. She'd seen everything in 25 years of family court. Derek sat in a $2,000 suit playing the role of concerned father. Tori wore a simple navy dress borrowed from Martha. Didn't fit perfectly, but that almost made her look more sympathetic. Derek's lawyer, Charles Bradford, was expensive and polished. He presented their evidence with practiced efficiency. Photos of Tori leaving work at midnight taken out of context. Business trip records making her look absent. School events she'd missed, 2 out of 47 over the whole year, but he made it sound like chronic neglect. An expert witness psychologist testified about the importance of stability and risks of maternal absence. Used clinical language to make normal working mother guilt sound like pathology. Derek sat looking concerned, gripping Tori's arm under the table. Then Gerald stood up. He methodically dismantled every claim. Midnight photos were from nights Tori worked late to secure contracts that saved 50 jobs. Business trips totaled 4 days in 6 months. Sophie had stayed with her grandmother, Derek's own mother, who'd refused to testify for him. Gerald noted that pointedly. The missed school events. 2 out of 47. Gerald had attendance records. Then he played the security footage. The courtroom went silent. Derek's aggressive approach Sunday morning, his demanding tone with Sophie, Sophie's visible fear hiding behind Noah, Derek's threatening language caught on camera. "You have no idea what I'm capable of. I'll make sure your little electrician friend is bankrupt." Linda's cell phone video came next. Catching the moment, Derek's mask fully dropped, pure venom in his voice threatening Tori. Sophie audibly crying in the background, written statements from 6 neighbors, Martha, Davis family, others, all testifying to Tori's attentive parenting, Sophie's visible happiness and security with her mother, Derek's surveillance and harassment. Judge Sampson watched without expression, re-watched Derek's threat twice. Then she asked Derek's lawyer directly, "Counselor, your client thinks threatening a child's mother in front of that child demonstrates good judgment and parental fitness." Bradford fumbled his response, tried to claim stress and unusual circumstances. Judge Sampson cut him off. "I've presided over family court for 25 years. I've seen every manipulation and lie that wealthy parents can devise to gain advantage in custody disputes. I've seen children used as weapons, parental alienation, false abuse allegations, financial warfare." She looked directly at Derek. "Mr. Manning, your money doesn't impress me. Your behavior frightens me. And more importantly, it frightens your daughter. That is what this court cares about." Bradford tried again. "Your Honor, if we could provide context." "The context is clear. Motion denied." Judge Sampson ruled from the bench. Denied Derek's emergency motion. Ordered a full investigation into his use of private investigators to harass Tori. Noted his behavior showed concerning lack of judgment regarding child's well-being and inability to control aggressive impulses. Primary custody remained with Tori. Review hearing in 6 weeks. Until then, Derek got supervised visitation only. 2 hours twice monthly. Court-appointed guardian present. Then Judge Sampson added one more order. Derek must undergo parenting evaluation and anger management assessment before the next review. Derek's face went purple. He stood up, started to object loudly. His lawyers grabbed him, pulled him back to his seat, whispered urgently in his ear. Judge Sampson watched this display with undisguised contempt. "Mr. Manning, are you demonstrating for me the emotional control you believe qualifies you for primary custody?" Derek sat, rigid with fury, said nothing. "That's what I thought. We're adjourned." Outside on the courthouse steps, Tori broke down crying, relief instead of despair. Gerald hugged her, told her they'd won the battle but to stay vigilant. Derek would appeal, but she was safe for now. Jim was waiting with Noah and Sophie by his truck. Sophie saw Tori and ran. "Can we go home now, Mommy?" Tori scooped her up. "Yes, baby. We can go home." Sophie ran to Jim next, hugged his leg. "You kept your promise. Daddy didn't take me." Jim picked her up. First time he'd held her. She was lighter than he expected. Fragile. "I told you. These hands don't break promises. Can I call you Uncle Jim?" Jim's eyes filled with tears he didn't bother hiding. "I'd like that very much." Derek exited the courthouse behind them, didn't look their way, got in his Mercedes in silence. His lawyers looked defeated, worried. Photographers snapped photos. Derek shielded his face. The Williamsburg Gazette got a shot of Derek looking furious next to a shot of Tori holding Sophie, both of them smiling. The war wasn't over, but they'd won the battle that mattered. 3 months passed like water through cupped hands. Spring came to Williamsburg the way it always did, slow at first, then all at once. Trees budding along Main Street, flowers pushing through mud in yards that had been frozen since November. Baseball season starting with kids in 2 big uniforms running bases at the park where Jim had played 30 years ago. Tori returned to Blake Manufacturing 3 days a week. Sarah Mitchell ran daily operations with the kind of competent efficiency that let Tori leave early to pick Sophie up from school. The board had been skeptical at first. CEO working part-time seemed like weakness, but the quarterly results spoke for themselves. Revenue up. Employee satisfaction higher than it had been in a decade. Turns out you could run a company and be present for your daughter. Novel concept. Derek had accepted the revised custody agreement without challenge. His legal team advised him that any further action would make things worse. The Williamsburg Gazette article had been picked up by regional papers. Business partners who'd competed for his attention were quietly distancing themselves. His company's stock had dipped 3%. Not catastrophic, but enough to hurt. Supervised visitation happened twice monthly now, 2 hours each time with Mrs. Thompson present. She was an older woman with kind eyes and a firm manner who took notes on everything. Derek showed up on time, brought age-appropriate gifts, spoke to Sophie with practiced warmth that never quite reached his eyes. Sophie was polite during these visits. Distant. No longer afraid, but not affectionate either. She called him Daddy because Mrs. Thompson said she should. But she called Jim Uncle Jim with genuine warmth, and that difference meant everything. The licensing board investigation had concluded in Jim's favor. Every client interviewed gave glowing reviews. Every inspection record was flawless. Rebecca Hughes had written in her official report that the complaint appeared to be harassment rather than legitimate concern. Jim's license was renewed without conditions. Carson Electric had more work than he could handle. Word spread about what he'd done for Victoria Blake, about standing up to Chicago money. Small-town hero narrative that made people want to hire him. Jim turned down half the jobs, spent more time with Noah, taught him things his own father had taught him. Sophie and Noah were inseparable. Same school bus every morning, same lunch table, homework together at Jim's kitchen counter while he made dinner, and Tori helped with math problems she'd forgotten how to solve. Tori had rented a small apartment 5 minutes from Jim's house. 2 bedrooms, kitchen where she learned to cook by trial and error, burned rice, overcooked pasta, laughed at her failures in a way she'd never allowed herself before. She attended every school event now, sat in bleachers like any parent. Nobody treated her like CEO anymore, just Sophie's mom. That felt better than any board meeting ever had. But something was unfinished between her and Jim. They circled each other carefully. Polite, friendly, co-parenting in everything but name. But neither one had acknowledged what the kids already knew, what Elena had heard on the courthouse steps, what everyone in Williamsburg saw when they looked at them together. June arrived with heat that made the asphalt shimmer. School let out for summer. The kids spent their days at Jim's house, swimming in the community pool, climbing the oak tree, playing video games in the air-conditioned living room when it got too hot outside. Tori came over most evenings after work, brought dinner or helped Jim cook. They'd developed routines without discussing them, comfortable patterns that felt like family. One Saturday afternoon, Jim was teaching Noah how to change the oil in his truck. Noah lay on a creeper board underneath while Jim supervised, pointing out the drain plug, explaining about the filter, passing down knowledge the way it was meant to be passed. Sophie and Tori walked up the driveway together. Sophie carried a basket of muffins she'd helped bake, lopsided frosting, proud smile. Tori carried a thick envelope. She handed it to Jim without explanation. He wiped grease from his hands and opened it. Deed to her old mansion, the one she'd sold 2 months ago. 7 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms, 2 big, 2 empty, 2 full of bad memories. Also inside the envelope, a certificate, official letterhead, Sarah Carson Memorial Fund for Maternity Care and Support for Single Parents, established at St. Mary's Children's Hospital with a $2.3 million endowment. Jim looked at the certificate, at Tori, at the kids racing toward the backyard arguing about who could climb the oak tree faster. His throat tightened. I wanted something good to come from that place. Tori's voice was quiet. Wanted Sarah's name to help other mothers, other families facing what you faced. Jim couldn't speak for a long moment, just stood there holding the certificate in greasy hands. Noah called from the backyard. Dad, Sophie wants to know if she can climb to the 3rd branch. Jim found his voice. Same rules as always, 3 branches max, test every branch before you trust it. Sophie's laughter carried across the yard, mixing with Noah's, rising into clear summer air like music. Jim looked at Tori, really looked at her, saw the woman who'd knocked on his door 3 months ago, soaked and terrified. Saw the woman standing here now with sunshine in her hair and Sophie's laughter in the background. He did something he hadn't done in 7 years. Reached out and took her hand. She didn't pull away. They stood there in the driveway, 2 people who'd survived their own storms, watching their children play. You know, I've been thinking. Jim's voice was rough. There's a place in town, Miller's Diner, makes decent meatloaf and apple pie. If you wanted to have dinner sometime, just us, like a date. Tori smiled. Real and private and fragile and transformative all at once. I'd like that very much. The kids' laughter got louder. Noah, watch this jump. Sophie. Wait, be careful. More laughter. No crash. Jim squeezed Tori's hand. Think we better supervise before someone breaks an arm. Together. Yeah, together. They walked hand in hand toward the backyard. The house behind them still needed painting. The truck still needed new brakes. There were dishes in the sink and laundry that wouldn't fold itself, and 1,000 ordinary problems waiting to be solved. But for the first time in a long time, neither of them was facing it alone. Miller's Diner was packed that Friday night. Jim and Tori sat in a booth by the window. No kids. Elena had taken them to a movie, giving the adults space to figure things out. The diner had been in Williamsburg since 1952. Red vinyl booths, black and white checkered floor, jukebox in the corner that still played actual records, waitresses who'd worked there for decades and knew everyone's order before they sat down. Betty came over with menus she didn't need to bring, smiled at Jim. Been a while since I've seen you out, honey. And with company, no less. Hi, Betty. This is Tori Blake. Oh, I know who she is. Betty winked. Whole town knows. Y'all are practically celebrities after that courthouse business. Coffee, please. They ordered. Meatloaf for Jim. Chicken fried steak for Tori. Both got apple pie after because Betty insisted, and you didn't argue with Betty. The conversation started awkward. Too formal, like strangers on a first date instead of people who'd been living in each other's pockets for months. Then Tori started laughing. What? This is ridiculous. I've seen you comfort my daughter at 2 in the morning. You've seen me fall apart at your kitchen table. We've faced down my ex-husband and his team of lawyers, and now we're sitting here making small talk about the weather. Jim smiled. First real smile she'd seen in a while. Fair point. What do you want to talk about? Something real. Something that matters. So they did. Tori told him about Sarah, about building a company while grieving her father who died of a stroke 5 years ago, about the pressure of being the first woman CEO in a male-dominated industry, about the loneliness of being successful and empty at the same time. Jim told her about Sarah, about the 3 weeks between Noah's birth and her death, about holding his newborn son in one arm and signing funeral papers with the other hand, about the 7 years he'd spent going through motions without really living. They talked until the diner closed. Betty brought them free coffee refills and pretended not to eavesdrop while absolutely eavesdropping. When they finally left, it was past 11. Stars visible overhead. Summer night warm enough that Tori didn't need the sweater she'd brought. Jim walked her to her car, stood there with hands in pockets, uncertain. I had a good time tonight. Me too. Maybe we could do this again. I'd like that. Tori reached up and kissed his cheek. Quick, gentle. Then got in her car before he could respond. Jim stood in the parking lot watching her taillights disappear, feeling something he'd thought was dead wake up inside his chest. Hope. August brought heat waves that made working outside brutal. Jim scheduled his jobs for early morning and late evening. Spent the middle of the day in air conditioning or at the community pool with the kids. He and Tori had settled into something that wasn't quite dating, but wasn't just friendship either. Dinners once a week. Movies with the kids on weekends. Long conversations on his porch after Sophie and Noah fell asleep. They hadn't defined what they were to each other, didn't need to. The kids had already decided. Martha Patterson had already decided. The whole town had already decided. Only Jim and Tori were still figuring it out. One evening in late August, they were sitting on Jim's porch, kids inside, watching a movie. Fireflies blinking in the yard, cicadas singing their summer song. I got a call from the hospital today. Tori's voice was quiet. About the memorial fund. Jim looked at her. They've already helped 6 families, single parents with newborns, covering medical costs, providing support services. One mother said it saved her life. Jim's throat tightened. Sarah would have liked that. I think so too. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Tori spoke again. Derek's moving to Seattle. New job. His lawyer called to arrange a revised visitation schedule. How do you feel about that? Relieved. Guilty for feeling relieved. Worried about Sophie. Tori pulled her knees up. He's still her father. Part of me thinks she should have a relationship with him. But another part knows that sometimes the best thing a bad parent can do is create distance. Tori looked at him. My father used to say that blood doesn't make you family. Showing up does. Being present. Choosing to stay when things get hard. Jim watched the fireflies. Derek's her father by blood, but he's never shown up for her. Not really. He shows up for himself, for his ego, for his need to control. And you, I'm not trying to replace him, just trying to be someone she can count on, someone who keeps promises. Tori reached over and took his hand. You're good at that. September arrived with cooler mornings and the start of school. Sophie started 3rd grade. Noah started 4th. They rode the bus together, same seats they'd claimed last spring. Jim drove Tori to Blake Manufacturing some mornings when their schedules aligned, waited in the truck while she ran inside for meetings, picked her up for lunch occasionally, Miller's Diner mostly, sometimes the sandwich shop on Oak Street. People in town smiled seeing them together. Nobody commented directly, but the approval was there, unspoken but clear. One Saturday in October, 6 months almost to the day since the storm, Jim woke up knowing something had to change. He couldn't keep living in this in-between space. Couldn't keep pretending what he felt for Tori was just friendship or gratitude or convenience. He loved her. Had probably loved her since the night she knocked on his door. Maybe before that. Maybe from the moment her father had told him years ago about his brilliant daughter who was drowning under the weight of expectations. But love required action, required risk, required opening himself to the possibility of loss again. That terrified him more than Derek Manning ever had. He called Elena, asked her a favor. She laughed and said it was about damn time. That evening, he asked Tori to come over. Said he wanted to show her something. Told her to bring Sophie. When they arrived, the backyard was transformed. String lights hung from the oak tree, table set with Sarah's good dishes that hadn't been used in 7 years, candles flickering in mason jars. Noah and Sophie were in the house watching a movie, under strict instructions not to interrupt unless someone was bleeding. Tori stopped at the edge of the porch. Jim, what is this dinner? Properly this time. He'd cooked. Actual cooking, not just heating things up. Grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, salad with homemade dressing his mother used to make. Apple pie from Miller's Diner because he wasn't that ambitious. They ate under the stars, talked about everything and nothing, the kind of conversation that feels like breathing. After dinner, Jim stood up, held out his hand. "Dance with me." "There's no music." "Sure there is." The cicadas sang. Somewhere down the street, someone had a radio playing. Faint country music drifting on the breeze. Jim pulled her close. They swayed together in his backyard, moving to music only they could hear. "I need to tell you something." Jim's voice was low, close to her ear. "Okay. I spent 7 years building walls, convincing myself that loving someone again was impossible, that I'd used up my chance at happiness and the rest was just going through motions until Noah was grown." Tori pulled back enough to see his face. "Then you knocked on my door in a storm, and those walls started crumbling, piece by piece. Every time Sophie laughed, every time you sat at my kitchen table, every time I watched you be strong and vulnerable and real." His hands tightened on her waist. "I love you, Victoria Blake. I love your daughter. I love the life we've been building together without admitting that's what we were doing. And I'm done pretending I don't." Tori's eyes filled with tears. "I love you too. I think I have since the night you made hot chocolate with cinnamon and asked for nothing in return." Jim kissed her then. First real kiss. 7 months in the making. Worth the wait. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. "The kids are going to be insufferable about this." Tori's voice was breathless. "They've been planning our wedding since the courthouse." "Smart kids." "Yeah, they are." December brought snow and Christmas lights and the kind of cold that made you appreciate warm houses and hot coffee. Jim and Tori had told the kids they were together officially now. Noah had shrugged and said, "Finally." Sophie had squealed and asked if this meant they were going to be sisters for real. Tori was spending more nights at Jim's house than at her apartment. Her lease was up in January and she hadn't renewed it, hadn't needed to discuss why. Christmas Eve, they decorated Jim's tree together, all 4 of them, stringing lights and hanging ornaments and arguing about whether the star or the angel should go on top. Sophie insisted on the angel. Noah wanted the star. They compromised by putting both, angel on top, star just below. Looked ridiculous but made both kids happy. Jim made hot chocolate the way he had that first night, cinnamon and 3 marshmallows. They sat in the living room watching the tree lights blink. Fire crackling in the fireplace, contentment so thick you could almost touch it. "I have something for you." Tori pulled an envelope from her bag, handed it to Jim. Inside were papers, legal documents. He read through them twice to make sure he understood. "You're making me a board member, co-chair of the Sarah Carson Memorial Fund. It's grown. We're expanding to 3 more hospitals across Iowa. I need someone who understands what the families are going through, someone who can guide the mission." Jim looked at Sarah's name on the letterhead, at the mission statement about supporting single parents through medical crisis. She would have loved this. "I know." Sophie and Noah fell asleep on the couch around 9. Jim carried Noah upstairs. Tori carried Sophie. They tucked both kids into Noah's room, let them sleep together like they always wanted. Downstairs, Jim pulled out a small box from his desk drawer, sat beside Tori on the couch. "I got you something too." She opened it. Inside was a key. "To the house. If you want it, no pressure. But your lease is up and you're here most nights anyway, and the kids want to share a room officially and—" Tori kissed him, stopping the nervous rambling. "Yes. Yeah. Yeah." January came with new beginnings. Tori moved into Jim's house officially. Sophie got her own room but still ended up in Noah's most nights. They'd built a fort between the beds and claimed it was for practical reasons. Blake Manufacturing announced that Victoria Blake would remain as CEO, but with a new family-first policy that allowed flexible scheduling for all employees with children. Board grumbled but couldn't argue with the results. Retention was up. Productivity was up. Turns out, people worked better when they weren't drowning in guilt. The Sarah Carson Memorial Fund held its first annual gala in February. Fancy event at a hotel in Des Moines. Tori in an evening gown. Jim in a suit he'd bought specifically for the occasion. Felt like a stranger in his own skin, but Tori said he looked handsome, so he endured it. They raised $200,000 that night, enough to expand to 2 more hospitals, enough to help 50 more families. During her speech, Tori talked about loss and love and second chances, about a man who'd opened his door to strangers and changed everything. She didn't look at Jim while she spoke, but everyone knew who she meant. March brought the anniversary of the storm. 1 year since that knock on the door. 1 year since everything changed. Jim and Tori took the kids to Miller's Diner for dinner, same booth where they'd had their first official date. Betty remembered and brought them free pie. "Look at you 4, Betty smiled. "Proper family now." Sophie and Noah didn't correct her, neither did Jim or Tori. After dinner, they drove to the cemetery, small plot on the edge of Williamsburg. Sarah's grave under an oak tree. Jim brought flowers like he did every month, but this time he brought Tori and the kids too. "Sarah, this is Tori, and Sophie. I think you'd like them. I think you'd be happy for us." He set the flowers down, stood there for a moment with his hand on the headstone. "The fund's helping people. Your name's making a difference. Noah's doing good in school. I'm doing good." Tori took his hand. "Thank you for loving him first." Her voice was quiet. "For showing him how to be the kind of man who opens doors in storms. We'll take care of him. I promise." They stood there together for a few minutes. Then Sophie asked if she could leave flowers too. Jim lifted her up so she could set them beside his. "Is this your wife who died?" Sophie's voice was serious. "Yeah. She's in heaven now with my grandpa. They're probably friends." "Probably. That's good. Nobody should be alone." Jim set her down. Felt tears prick his eyes. "You're right, sweetheart. Nobody should." April arrived with the kind of weather that made you believe in new beginnings. Warm enough to work outside. Cool enough that you didn't melt doing it. Jim was installing a ceiling fan in the Johnson house when his phone rang. Tori's number. "Hey, are you sitting down?" His stomach dropped. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. The opposite." Derek called. "He's engaged. Moving to Seattle permanently. Wants to sign over primary custody officially. Said Sophie deserves stability and he can't provide that from across the country." Jim climbed down from the ladder. "How do you feel?" "Like I can breathe for the first time in 3 years. Like Sophie's finally safe. Like we can stop looking over our shoulders." "That's good. That's really good." Tori's voice got quieter. "There's something else. Something I've been thinking about." "Yeah. Sophie asked me this morning if you could adopt her. Officially. Said she wants your name. Wants to be Sophie Carson." Jim sat down on the Johnsons' couch, hand over his mouth. "Jim, you still there?" "Yeah, I'm here." "You don't have to answer now. It's a big thing, and I know—" "Yes." "What?" "Yes, I'd be honored. I love that little girl like she's mine. Has been mine since the night I made her hot chocolate." Tori was crying on the other end, happy tears that made her voice shake. Okay, good. I'll call the lawyer." That summer they made it official. Court proceedings that were routine and beautiful at the same time. Judge Sampson presiding. Same judge who'd ruled on the custody case. She smiled when she signed the papers. "Good to see you back here for happy reasons, Mr. Carson. Sophie, do you understand what this means? Sophie nodded seriously. It means Jim's my dad for real now. That's right. How do you feel about that? Happy. He promised nobody would take me away and he kept his promise. He always keeps his promises. Judge Sampson's eyes got misty. Some promises are worth keeping. Adoption approved. Outside the courthouse, Sophie threw herself at Jim. Can I call you Dad now? Jim picked her up, tears running down his face for the third time since she'd come into his life. I'd like that very much. September marked 18 months since the storm. The house had been painted finally, pale blue that Tori picked out. The truck had new brakes and a new transmission because the old one finally gave up. Jim had hired an assistant for Carson Electric. Young guy named Tommy, fresh out of trade school, eager to learn, reminded Jim of himself at that age. Teaching came naturally to Jim, breaking down complex electrical systems into steps Tommy could follow, passing down knowledge his father had given him. Some debts could only be repaid forward. Tori had stepped down as CEO, still on the board, still involved, but Sarah Mitchell ran the company now. Tori focused on the memorial fund full-time, the mission that mattered more than quarterly earnings. They'd helped 200 families in 18 months, expanded to hospitals across 3 states, saved lives in ways both measurable and immeasurable. One Friday evening in late September, they were all in the kitchen. Jim teaching Noah and Sophie how to make Sarah's famous lasagna, the recipe his wife had perfected over years, the one she'd always made for special occasions. Tori watched from the doorway, smile on her face. What? Jim looked up from showing Sophie how to layer noodles. Nothing. Just thinking how different everything is. Good different. The best different. Noah added too much cheese. Sophie got sauce on her shirt. The kitchen was a disaster, but the lasagna turned out perfect. They ate together at the table Jim had grown up eating at, the one his parents had bought in 1985. Scarred wood and mismatched chairs and enough memories to fill a house. After dinner, Sophie and Noah went outside to catch fireflies in the yard. Jim and Tori cleaned up together, moving around each other with practiced ease. I got a call from the hospital in Cedar Rapids. Tori was drying dishes. The fund helped a single father whose wife died from complications. Baby's healthy, father's getting support services, counseling, medical care, everything. Jim's hands stilled in the soapy water. What was her name? The wife. Jennifer. Jennifer Patterson. No relation to our Martha as far as I know. Jennifer Patterson. We'll remember her. They added her name to the memorial wall they'd started. Every family helped, every life touched. Names in brass on oak panels in the hospital lobby. Sarah Carson at the top. Then all the others below. Lives saved and honored and remembered. October brought cool weather and changing leaves. The oak tree in Jim's backyard turned gold and red. Sophie and Noah raked leaves into piles and jumped in them. Tradition as old as childhood itself. Jim was up on a ladder hanging Christmas lights early. Tori liked to have them up before Thanksgiving when Noah came outside. Dad, can I ask you something? Sure, buddy. Are you and Tori going to get married? Jim climbed down, sat on the porch steps. Noah sat beside him. Would you want that? Sophie does. She talks about it all the time, having a real wedding where she gets to wear a fancy dress and throw flowers. What about you? How do you feel? Noah was quiet for a minute, processing like he always did. I think Mom would want you to be happy, and Tori makes you happy. Sophie makes me happy. So yeah, I'd want that. Jim pulled his son close. You're a good kid. You know that. You've mentioned it once or twice. That evening after the kids were asleep, Jim pulled out the small box he'd been carrying in his pocket for 3 months, waiting for the right moment. He found Tori on the porch, coffee in her hands, stars overhead. Cold night. I like it. Reminds me we're alive. Jim sat beside her, heart pounding. I've been thinking about something. Dangerous habit. He smiled, despite his nerves. The kids asked me today, Noah specifically, about whether we're getting married. Tori looked at him. What did you tell him? That I hadn't asked you yet. Seemed premature to answer without doing that first. Jim pulled out the box. Simple ring inside. Not expensive, not flashy, just honest. Like everything else between them. I know we've done this backwards. Moved in together. Raised kids together. Built a life together. But I want to do this part right. He opened the bahi. Victoria Blake, will you marry me? Tori was crying before he finished the question. Yes. God. Yes. He slipped the ring on her finger. Pulled her close. Kissed her under stars that had witnessed every beginning and ending in Williamsburg's history. Should we tell the kids? In the morning, let them sleep. We've got time now. They sat together on the porch until past midnight, planning a future that had seemed impossible 2 years ago, talking about small weddings and big families and the ordinary magic of choosing each other every day. December brought their wedding. Small ceremony at the courthouse with Judge Sampson officiating, family and close friends only. Martha Patterson cried. Elena whistled. Frank Morrison clapped Jim on the back so hard he stumbled. Sophie wore a fancy dress like she'd wanted. Threw flowers with such enthusiasm half of them hit the judge. Noah stood beside Jim. Best man at 9 years old. Serious and proud. Tori wore simple white. Hair loose. No makeup. Beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with designer clothes or corporate polish. Jim wore the suit from the gala. Still felt like a stranger in it, but less so now. Judge Sampson smiled when they exchanged vows. I've married hundreds of couples in this room. Most I give 50-50 odds. You two I'm betting on forever. They honeymooned in Iowa. Drove to a cabin by a lake 3 hours away. Brought the kids because leaving them seemed wrong. Spent a week fishing and hiking and doing nothing in particular. The kind of nothing that felt like everything. Sophie caught the biggest fish. Noah fell in the lake. Tori burned dinner trying to cook over a campfire. Jim fixed everything that broke in the cabin because, of course, things broke. Perfect in its imperfection. March came around again. 2 years since the storm. 2 years since everything changed. The Sarah Carson Memorial Fund had helped 500 families, expanded to hospitals across 5 states, employed a staff of 12, changed the landscape of postpartum care for single parents. Tori ran it with the same intensity she'd brought to Blake Manufacturing, but with joy instead of obligation. Purpose instead of pressure. Jim still ran Carson Electric, still took service calls, still taught Tommy the trade, but he'd cut his hours, spent mornings with the kids, afternoons with Tori, evenings with his family around the table his parents had left him. One Saturday afternoon in early April, warm enough to work outside, Jim was teaching Noah and Sophie how to change the oil in Tori's car, passing down knowledge his father had given him. Why do we need to know this? Sophie was dubious, hands covered in grease. Because knowing how things work gives you power. Independence. Nobody can take advantage of you if you understand the basics. But we could just pay someone. Sure. But then you're dependent on that someone. Your grandfather taught me that a person who can fix things themselves is never helpless. Noah tightened the drain plug. Sophie checked the oil level. Both concentrating with the seriousness children bring to adult tasks. Tori watched from the porch, camera in hand, capturing the moment. When the kids finished oil changed successfully, they ran inside to wash up. Jim stayed in the driveway, cleaning tools, organizing his workspace the way his father had taught him. Tori came down the steps. That was beautiful. Oil changes, you teaching them, passing things down. Your dad would be proud. Jim looked at the house, at the oak tree where 2 kids had climbed every branch, at the truck he'd maintained for 15 years, at the life he'd built from grief and stubbornness and the decision to open a door on a terrible night. My father taught me that storms destroy things, but sometimes they create things too. He pulled Tori close. A door opened on a terrible night can lead to mornings worth waking for. Home isn't a building or an address. It's the people you let inside. The ones you choose to trust with your fear and your hope, and the soft parts of yourself you kept hidden for too long. Tori leaned against his chest. That's beautiful. You should write that down. Maybe I will. The kids burst out of the house arguing about something, probably whose turn it was to pick the movie. Probably something that didn't matter, but felt important to them. Jim and Tori stood in the driveway watching them. 2 parents, 2 kids, 1 family built from broken pieces. The house still needed work, always would. The truck would need new parts eventually. The oak tree would need trimming. The gutters would need cleaning. But none of that mattered. What mattered was Sophie's laughter mixing with Noah's. What mattered was Tori's hand in his. What mattered was the memorial fund carrying Sarah's name forward into families she'd never meet. What mattered was the small, careful life they'd built together. The one that looked ordinary from the outside but felt extraordinary from within. Jim had spent 7 years convinced that happiness was something that happened to other people. Something he'd used up his share of. Something to remember, but never expect again. He'd been wrong. Happiness wasn't a finite resource you exhausted. It was a choice you made every morning. A door you opened despite the storm. A hand you reached for in the dark. The kids settled their argument. Sophie had won, apparently. They were watching something animated. Jim and Tori went inside to join them. Camera pulled back showing the whole scene. Small house with fresh paint. Old truck with new brakes. Oak tree with 2 kids' heights marked on the trunk. Spring afternoon light golden and warm. Sense of home not in the building, but in the people. Small town Iowa. Population 3,200, where everyone knew your business and showed up when you needed them and remembered your father's kindness 40 years later. Where storms came through and destroyed things. But sometimes if you were lucky, they created things too. Where a door opened on a terrible night could lead to mornings worth waking for. Where a family could be built from strangers and choice and love that expected nothing in return. Where Sarah Carson's name lived on in brass and oak. In helped families and saved lives. In the daughter-in-law she'd never met, who honored her memory with every breath. Where an electrician from Iowa learned that keeping promises mattered more than any profit. That opening doors mattered more than protecting walls. That the life worth living was the one you built with people brave enough to knock. The frame froze on that image. House, truck, tree, family, everything that mattered, everything that would endure, then faded to black on the sound of children's laughter. Home.